Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is a Ukraine War news update, first part thereof for the 11th of May 2025. I say first part thereof. I've done a breaking news update already concerning the Putin statement last night, 1:30 in the morning, Moscow time, and he kept the journalists waiting an hour and a half. Wow. And he came out and basically stated that they weren't going to go for the ceasefire and they want direct negotiations instead. More on that a little later. We'll go to the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply. You can find them linked in the description below. 1,310 personnel lost is pretty significant. That's a consistently decent number we've seen in that category, although we have seen much lower tank and AFV losses. 2 tank losses yesterday, 6 troop carrying AFVs, much lower than the daily average, and 33 artillery systems, although that is sort of 1.5 times the daily average. It's much lower than we have seen previously. 1 MLRS, multiple launch rocket system, 1 anti-aircraft warfare system, 117 vehicles and fuel tanks, and 3 pieces of special equipment indicates that things are still going on the front lines. In fact, we can see that from this deep state analysis that over the 3 days of the so-called ceasefire, that Victory Day parade truce, ceasefire that the Russians dictated, on the 8th of May there were 193 assaults, the 9th of May 196 assaults, and the 10th of May yesterday 161 assaults. So for comparison, in April, the average daily activity was 155 assaults per day. In other words, all 3 of those days saw above average assault numbers. The ceasefire certainly didn't apply to the front lines. That said, we have seen fewer bits of kit lost. I guess that the Ukrainians are seeing fewer mechanized attacks using established combat asset material. They are seeing more, I'm speculating somewhat here, but more vehicles like your motorbikes, quads, golf buggies, cars, but also just infantry assaults. There are some pretty staggering figures coming out. I was talking yesterday about how I think, even though some of these figures look pretty low, and they have been lower over the last few days, but going back over the last sort of 3 months, where Andrew Perpetua and his team, I think, have been struggling to get through all of the videos that are being released, you are seeing just huge numbers of vehicles and fuel tanks every single day. And that is a challenge when you have to geolocate all of those pieces of kit and work out whether when you're seeing the visual imagery for them, whether that's already been recorded, when it happened, etc., etc. So, it's incredibly time-consuming stuff. And you are now, I think, with the Brave 1 project, whereby you're getting points for vehicles, you're seeing a lot more video evidence of the strike. So, if you just added up all of these strikes every single day, all 117, 120, so that's, I don't know, 100, you're looking at 200 bits of kit. That's every single day needing to geolocate that, and that's on a relatively quiet day. So if you go back a month when it was, maybe 200 vehicles and fuel tanks, and you've got 70 artillery systems and 30 troop carrying AFVs and 15 tanks and 4 MLRS, do you know what I mean? That was just too difficult to do back then. And now, but the situation then was that you probably were only getting a fraction of the videos of that. And what's happening potentially now is, even though the numbers might be coming down a little bit, I'm arguing that the numbers of videos of that which has been destroyed is going up. The fraction of videos of everything being destroyed is going up, and now we're actually in real terms possibly seeing more evidence every single day. I'm not showing lots of stuff to you because you've seen it all before. I try and show you stuff that tells us something new, but here's kind of what I'm talking about. So in just 2 weeks, the CSO alpha of the SBU with the strike drones and other firepower hit. So 2 weeks, and imagine you are an Andrew Perpetua team, like geolocator, you have to geolocate in 2 weeks. One unit on the front line has destroyed or hit 53 tanks, 81 APCs, 103 artillery and multiple launch rocket systems, 11 air defense systems, 6 electronic warfare systems, 725 vehicles, 37 drones, 232 communication antennas. All of this stuff, every single one of those is equipment that Andrew Perpetua and his team would otherwise be geolocating. 637 enemy positions, 11 ammunition depots, 1 depot, 1,013 occupiers. And there's a video with a whole bunch of stuff to suggest that. That's incredible. So it's just... how many, that one unit, this is one unit, and I said this yesterday about Birds of Magia, where they release a video and it's a montage, and sometimes each hit is only like 1 second or 2 seconds. You're like, bang, bang, bang. And then sometimes on the screen, you've got 4 happening simultaneously. And sometimes, I'm sure he said something like 9 on a screen simultaneously, where you're like, how, this is just too much information. So I think that's why we're not getting your loss lists at the moment. But just, that's an incredible accomplishment from one single unit. Absolutely extraordinary. Okay, 225th Assault Regiment wiped out a Russian military vehicle concentration. Out of all the destroyed equipment, only 2 were true combat vehicles. So this goes back to what we've been saying for a long time, which is that actually most of the attack vehicles being used at the moment are non-traditional combat assets. The days of seeing a column of 20 infantry fighting vehicles and tanks is long gone, and now we're seeing 1 or 2 tanks and infantry fighting vehicle, and then the rest are kind of other sort of vehicles and fuel tanks type category vehicles. So out of all of the destroyed equipment in this, only 2 were true combat vehicles, a T-72 tank and a BMD-2. The rest consisted of storm vehicles equipped with anti-drone shields. Now in this video, this is this is what you want to see. So you've got some vehicles outside here, and then you've got basically an undercover parking lot of vehicles, and the drones go inside this and then target the vehicles that are inside with also, I think, some artillery hits on some of the vehicles outside, as well as I think drone hits on the vehicles outside. So let's just see some evidence of what's going on here. I want to show you, it's not super clear. So yep, okay, you've got some vehicles. Actually, that's a drone strike on that vehicle outside. You've got a lot of damage to that whole I don't know what you call it, warehouse, I guess agricultural facility. That looks like an artillery strike there. You got the BMD-2 being hit, but it's actually when they go inside that's pretty fascinating. So you're seeing it like second hand here, or third hand even. So this is the drone going down the tunnel, and the tunnel, or that warehouse thing with that domed roof, has loads of shrapnel holes in the roof that you can see as it flies down there, and the drone is looking at the equipment inside, finds a tank on this particular go, and then has a go at T-72, and then you can see it from the outside. So there's lots of equipment that's taken out in that one single place, as the Russians try and hide away their equipment where they can, obviously fairly sensibly. But only 2 of the pieces of equipment that were destroyed there were traditional combat assets, which I think tells you something. Okay, we've got a MiG-29 strike on a Russian drone operator hub in Tetkino. Not for the first time either. And in fact, not even in Tetkino. I think we had another drone hub hit in Tetkino recently. This is with an AASM hammer bomb. The precision strike destroyed the building, personnel, and drone equipment. I mean, these are substantial strikes that the hammer bombs are able to do. I mean, that is taking out that building pretty well there. and that is supposedly a drone hub. So that's the end of that drone hub, it looks. Okay, then finally, just spare a thought for those special forces troops who are going through swamps while we sit comfortably in our offices, lounges, kitchens. You're not crawling through or wading through waist-deep swamps with a heavy machine gun over your shoulder. That is, the life of a special forces operative out on a mission. And well done to those people prepared to do all of these things in the name of supporting the future of their country. Okay, moving on to distant strikes. And last night there was, after a few nights off, a large wave of drones attacking Ukraine. 108 flew over the border, 60 were shot down, 41 stopped with electronic warfare, presumably then 7 hitting their target. That's an okay interception rate, actually, slightly better than we have seen recently. But it could be that the Ukrainians were able to regather their senses after 3 days of relative peace in the skies and, recharge batteries, literally recharge batteries, air defense batteries with interceptor missiles. Ukraine is running out of air defense interceptors, though, says Euromaidan Press, but they found a solution: destroy Russia's missiles before they launch. Ukrainian drones just flew 240 kilometers into Russia and struck Shaikovka airbase. So this happened a few nights back for the second time in 6 weeks. The target storage facilities for the Kh-22, a 1960s era missile fired with 3,000 liters of extremely toxic fuel, heptyl and concentrated nitric acid. These ancient missiles are uniquely vulnerable to shrapnel damage. As aviation expert Bill Sweetman noted, quote, "Nothing says fun like flying around with an ancient missile containing 4 tons of hypergolic fuel." The maths is brutally simple. Every missile destroyed on the ground is one less threatening Ukrainian civilians. With Patriot batteries stretched thin and interceptor shortages mounting, Ukraine is taking the fight to the source. NASA satellites captured the fires burning at the base. Russia has already lost 5 of its 42 Tu-22 bombers since the war began, some to crashes, some to Ukrainian strikes, and now Ukraine is systematically raising the cost of those bombing campaigns. When defense is enough, offense becomes survival. I've mentioned before how the Ukrainians seem to have a tendency to strike not at the aircraft on these air bases, but to have a go at the the structures that are there, more consistently. In other words, you can't move structures, but you can move planes. So if you have a satellite imagery of an airbase, it might be, 2 days old, and then you do a strike there. You don't know if they've moved planes. So if you're going to spend a lot of money and effort and resources on striking an airbase and you're looking to hit those planes, you could end up just hitting a bit of tarmac and it not having any effect. However, those warehouses for weapons, they don't move, right? And so you can rest assured that when you see a satellite image from 3 days before, that warehouse is still going to be there. So you strike at the warehouse and you hopefully take out important fuels, lubricants, or indeed the weapons that these planes are going to fire. So that is apparently what they're doing. Now, speaking of destroyed targets that Ukrainian either drones or missiles or indeed HIMARS missiles have hit. New satellite pictures show HIMARS absolutely wrecked the Strela plant, and I reported this way back, when was it? 7 days ago. This is a week ago. I don't even remember those photos. That's a Strela plant in Bryansk being hit. Well, it could well have been hit by HIMARS, so it's obviously close enough. Absolutely wrecked the Strela plant in Russia's Bryansk region. The place is toast. Main buildings and warehouse are gone. That plant was making parts for Russian military gear, not any more, is the claim. Obviously, you can make more sense of these pictures than I can, but the claim is it's absolutely wrecked. I don't know if it tells you that, but there are claims that there's quite a bit of damage done to that site. Then also on May the 7th, a strike hit a central workshop of the Basalt defense plant in Krasnoarmeysk, Moscow region, and I remember struggling with that name last time. A key producer of air bombs, RPGs and mortar rounds. The facility also handles R&D and weapons testing, so more satellite evidence coming out to suggest strikes on these places, but it's very difficult to really get any sense of battle damage assessment. Yep, okay, you got a hole in the roof there of that one building, but the resolution of that satellite imagery is absolutely terrible, so who knows what really took place there. Now, this is a strike I knew nothing about. So Intel Schizo says, took Ukraine long enough. This is now the second strike over the past 3 years by Ukraine on major Russian logistics node at Valuki, not even 20 miles from the front line. This rail yard is a primary logistics node for nearly half the Russian front line in Ukraine. I've covered this rail yard in other threads, which will be attached below. So, you know, if you click on the link to this thread, you'll be able to go and see the rest of the threads. So this is pretty close to the front line. Just trying to work out exactly where this is and what part of the front line we're talking about. I'm not 100% sure there. Luhansk. So we're up Kramatorsk. Okay, so that looks like it's not. That's Kharkiv, Vovchansk. This is really close to the Russian border then. Okay, so this is Kharkiv. That's Kharkiv city. And this is where the front line comes down. We've been seeing the Russians get across the Oskil River here. This is Kupiansk there. So you've got the forest just north of Kupiansk. And yeah, so it's just behind there. Okay, right. What do we have here? So, wow, if we look at this, we can see that there's quite a substantial fire there. I've not seen this footage before, so that's interesting. And there's another strike, this time going back to March the 15th. About effing time, this rail yard 15 miles from the Ukrainian border and is the primary node of moving supplies to Russian forces from international border all the way down to Kupiansk sector. Russian military logistics go from Valyuki to Luhansk to Severodonetsk, which is about 200 miles by rail. So I think I might have read this one to you, saying that it makes it a longer round trip and it's a really important place to hit. And in fact, there are, I think there's some more images, coming from there. So Valyuki, Russians report a strike in the railway area. And so that is going back a few months. For too long, Intel Schizo continues, Ukraine has been focused on social media hype strikes and not shaping operations to degrade enemy logistics across large swathes of occupied Ukraine. Russia needs consistent supplies of large quantities of food, fuel, water, spare parts, munitions, etc. every 48 hours, or else their forces start running out of material needed to sustain combat operations effectively. Valyuki is one of the main hubs to bring these supplies into occupied Ukraine, and it sits 15 miles away from the front lines, and only twice during the entire war has it been attacked. They've certainly flown over this rail yard literally thousands of times to send their long-range one-way attack drones deep into Russia to hit unimportant targets. That clicks likes on social media. So across 6 axes, Russian logistics needs 515,000 troops, 8,000 tanks, 34,000 AFVs, 3,500 towed guns, 3,000, etc., etc. And then you're going to need small arms ammo, all the ammo, all the rockets, all of the fuel, etc., etc. Total ammunition by weight would be 50,490 tons, and to transport all of that to the front line, you'd need 8,416 truckloads if using KAMAZ 5350 logistics trucks. So on and so forth. You get the point. For fuel, ideally, every 48 hours, a force of this size needs 2,500,000 gallons of fuel, to be exact, just for their tanks. To transport the resupply fuel, you need 3,553 ATZ-75350 fuel trucks. So in total, the Russians would just need under 13,000 trips just to supply the frontline forces with fuel and ammunition. Another way of looking at the needs of transporting the fuel instead of truck is by train. To transport all of this, you would need 83 tank car equivalents. Additionally, you would need to transport 2.5 million gallons of water to the troops every 48 hours, which would need 85 tank car equivalents, and then so on and so forth. And you get, a real analysis there of everything you would need in order to supply your army. This rail yard should be a pile of scrap metal and inoperable, and every time a maintenance vehicle goes to this rail yard to attempt repairs should be blown up, and the Russians should be having to use the other rail lines that add over a day of travel and hundreds of miles extra per trip, putting further strain on maintenance of Russian rail cars and locomotives. Want to take a bet what's inside the gondolas at Vyoki in photo 1, hint photo 2. So here you have photo 1 and photo 2. Munitions could well be in some of these trucks and actually target areas of this particular rail yard, but who knows. Yes, I mean, I don't know enough here as to why Ukraine wouldn't have been hitting this routinely over time. I mean, you've got a whole bunch of logistics nodes. Some of them have been hit. Ilovaisk has been hit a number of times. Earlier on in the war, though, I haven't really seen too much rail logistics get hit more recently. And I would agree. It does seem kind of weird that would be the case, but I don't know. I'm sure there's a method to the madness. But it's interesting to see that finally being here. And staying on railways, Chris Owicki, as we move to other bits and pieces, has a thread on the ongoing crisis at Russian railways deepening, with 50% cut in payments to employees and such a severe shortage of personnel that some divisions of the company are down to 40% of their intended staff numbers. Despite this, it has imposed a ban on hiring. The state-owned railway monopoly has been facing a worsening staffing and financial crisis brought on by a combination of a lack of spare parts caused by sanctions, economic problems, and staff leaving for much better paid jobs in the army or factories. The Telegram channel that he often refers to reports that the company is trying to fix the hole in the finances by drastically cutting expenses on employee costs and banning hiring new people. Bonuses have been cancelled, leading to a large reduction in salaries. Russian railway salaries are already low at around 70,000 rubles, $837 a month, and uncompetitive with military or factory jobs. The cancellation of quarterly bonuses is equivalent to 30 to 50% pay cuts, a loss equivalent to up to $1,195. Despite this, the company claims that its revenue grew over 6.4% in quarter 1 2025 and amounted to $159 million, with revenue for the operating period growing by 12.6% to $9.2 billion. Managers have awarded themselves a 50 million ruble bonus pot. The company's supposed profitability is hard to reconcile with its disastrous staffing situation, which is almost certainly seriously affecting its daily operations. Staff turnover is reported to average 12% and is as high as 35% among those in their first year of employment. Thousands of vacancies reportedly exist at railway stations for vital roles such as train operators, dispatchers and duty officers. Track workers are in even shorter supply, with figures put at only 40 to 60% of the required numbers. And last year, Russian Railways issued an appeal to retired personnel and railway veterans to return to help out with the staffing crisis. It seems likely that this is not met with much success. The crisis on Russian railways has profound implications for Russia's economy. The company has a monopoly on rail transport in Russia, which still depends heavily on the railways. Over 40% of the country's total transport turnover is accounted for by rail. So interesting little analysis there. Now, going on to my breaking news subject of the ceasefire demands from the European leaders and Zelensky, and with the backing of Trump, we had Putin announcing that he wasn't going to do a ceasefire, but how about getting together a meeting in Istanbul on the 15th, which is basically to turn down the ceasefire, but to then offer the kind of level above that, which is face-to-face meetings. But without a ceasefire, you can drag those meetings, negotiations on forever and a day and continue fighting. In other words, you're really not agreeing to a ceasefire, which was the absolute red line demand. Zakharova, the Ministry for Foreign Affairs spokeswoman, has said Putin has made it clear: first negotiations on the causes, then talks on a ceasefire. Kiev misread Putin's statement regarding talks I don't think they did. I think that's pretty much how it was understood. The question is, as I said before, what's Trump's take? He seems to be taken in by what Putin has said, but actually Putin has denied the ceasefire, and it's as simple as that. We've probably reached a point where the US, with its desire for a 30-day ceasefire and ability to enforce sanctions, and Europe and Ukraine are starting to act together, and the pressure is now shifting towards Russia, says Estonian Prime Minister. In other words, it looks like there is more unity within the allies now than there has been for some months, since January the 20th. Indeed, we heard that Emmanuel Macron had come out and said an unconditional ceasefire is not preceded by negotiations, and that Putin's proposed talks is a first step, but not enough. Is not a ceasefire, and you can't have negotiations while you're still bombing the crap out of Ukraine. Well, now the Germans have made their announcement in light of what the Russians said. Quote, yesterday in Kiev, we called for a 30-day ceasefire with our partners in order to create space for negotiations. Ukraine agreed to this without any ifs or buts. If the Russian side now is now signaling a willingness to talk, that is initially a good sign, but it's by no means sufficient. We expect Moscow to agree to a ceasefire now, which would make real talks possible in the first place. First, the weapons must fall silent, then talks can begin. So this is France and Germany being very consistent here on that reply, which is, yeah, great, okay, willingness to directly negotiate is good, but it's not a ceasefire, and we've asked for a ceasefire, so you need to do a ceasefire. President Macron has supported the idea of deploying foreign troops in Ukraine to help stabilise the situation after hostilities with Russia. He estimates a few thousand foreign troops could be deployed in Le Parisien. So good news there. And in fact, I think Macron is coming out again. Like I said before, those snap French elections were called because of the disastrous European elections for France and the growth of Rassemblement National, who are broadly much more anti-Ukrainian and pro-Russian than the majority. So he was really leading in terms of support for Ukraine, Emmanuel Macron, and then that sort of did him in. Now he's coming back because I've long talked about there needing to be a Central European leader, like not Central Europe, but a European leader who is the focus point for support for Ukraine. And it was looking like it was Macron. Now Keir Starmer's been elected. He's actually stood up. And then you've got Donald Tusk hanging around a bit. And then you've got Friedrich Merz, who is seemingly quite strong on support for Ukraine and has positioned himself at the middle as well. So you've got these four people actually really are like the focal point at the moment. But Macron could well be, I think, the linchpin there. So I showed you the very close relationship he has with Zelensky, as you can see from that image there. The hug that preceded that was just really close. Macron grabbing his head, and it was all like, it was really intimate. And they do have, supposedly according to the New York Times, a really close relationship now, Macron and Zelensky. So Macron has gone back to being this guy at the center. Zelensky was even saying that he understands a war, like he's he knows a lot about war type thing. Zelensky was saying, as he, I believe, fills Macron in regularly. They speak, they just phone each other up, and I think that relationship reflects how Macron is now central. He's a pivotal force in support for Ukraine. And it is interesting how here we've got a slick video put together, Macron's trip to Kiev, and you don't necessarily get that from Merz, from Starmer, or from Tusk. But you do get it from Macron, and I just think that's interesting, and I like the fact they've put this kind of slick video together. Good news. Now, just before I leave you, I didn't know where this could be in the geopolitical bit, but often talk about like spies and stuff in this video. Fascinating piece in The Guardian here. Is Russia co-opting US far-right groups to attack Western democracies? Startling allegations that the base's leader is a Russian spy led to suggestions that the Kremlin is playing the long game. I'm going to read most of this to you. It's absolutely fascinating. Former Pentagon contractor works with secretive sections of US Special Forces, then ups and moves to Russia. He gets married, radicalizes, and starts popping up on Telegram channels as the leader of a neo-Nazi terrorist group recruiting Americans. Soon, allegations swell that he's a Russian spy. While this sounds something like Tom Clancy would write, it is reality. Ronaldo Nazaro, better known as the leader of The Base, once worked in drone targeting with the US Special Operations Command in Iraq and Afghanistan. Recently, The Guardian revealed allegations from inside the base that he was long suspected of working with the FSB, one of Russia's main intelligence services. If true, the startling revelation about Nazaro fits into the Kremlin's well-documented global mission of co-opting far-right and criminal organizations to carry out attacks on Western democracies. That mission is very much alive and well. Quote, the Kremlin plays the long game and is highly invested in developing assets that can be used to wreak havoc on the West, said Colin Clark, a geopolitics expert and director of the research at the Sufan Center, which has closely followed Russia's flurry of sabotage operations around the world. Russian intelligence services are using far-right terror groups to their advantage, he says. Since the invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, world governments have been on edge. With the unlimited military resources it had during the Cold War era, the Kremlin has turned to the tactics of hybrid warfare to undermine its enemies and neighbors. A spate of suspected covert assassinations, arsons, and sabotage in the West have followed. Quote, Russia has also been accused of funding far-right political parties, which can serve as a Trojan horse of sorts for more nefarious operations, said Clark. Part of the global mission has included using disinformation to stoke xenophobic online sentiments in Britain and elsewhere, laundering cash payments to far-right political parties across Europe through dodgy media outlets has also been a mainstay of the Kremlin playbook. But in some other cases, using connections through its globally designated terror group, the Russian Imperial Movement, or RIM, the Kremlin has provided on-the-ground paramilitary training to Swedish extremists outside their country and then sent them back. In another separate incident, Russia was suspected of having a hand in getting Polish militants to attempt a false flag attack in Ukraine. Quote, since Moscow can be strategic when it comes to state-sponsored terrorism, the Kremlin may be cultivating relationships with these groups as a form of strategic depth, saving them for a rainy day, so to speak, Clark explained, referring to the base. In some ways, it's similar to how countries like Iran and Pakistan maintain linkages with terrorist groups. In October, the head of the UK's domestic intelligence service, MI5, accused Russian agents of being behind, quote, actions conducted with increasing recklessness on European and British soil. Stateside, there is not the same extensive evidence of similar direct action via Kremlin assets using far-right extremist groups, but there has been no shortage of suspicions. Quote, that was a joke going around and we never confirmed it, but you tell me, said Scott Payne, a former FBI undercover agent who infiltrated the base, about Nazaro's links to Russian handlers. And this is like, sums it all up to me. His synopsis here. Quote, you got a guy who is a citizen, graduated from Villanova, worked somewhere in the army, flipped, radicalized, and then moved to St. Petersburg, Russia, and has a Russian wife and kids. Payne, who recently released the memoir codenamed Pale Horse about his experience in the base and other assignments with the far right as a bureau agent, explained that Nazaro set off alarm bells both inside his group and the FBI. Quote, I didn't confirm it, but I was told they had tracked $1 million going through his accounts, but all he was doing was supposed to be teaching English, Payne said. It goes with the modus operandi, right? If you're talking about foreign influence operations. Nazaro, who appeared in widely panned interview on Russian state television in 2020, denying that he was an agent of their government, has roundly denied any claims he has nefarious government backers. The news media has recently once again dragged out the old and tired accusation of me being a government agent, Nazaro said in a Telegram statement released in late April. I've never had contact with Russian security services, but in April, the base unveiled a Ukrainian cell offering operatives money for assassinating politicians in the country or attacking police and military targets. Backlash followed. The Ukrainian and American far-right Telegram accounts accusing Nazaro of being a spy in league with Russia. It also coincided with reports that Russia was enhancing its recruitment of Ukrainian locals whom it is sending on suicide missions in the Kherson region. Quote, how does the base have money for so many bots and rewards for actions, speculated one anti-Nazaro user affiliated with the base on Telegram. I wonder who funds them. Sources inside the US intelligence community had previously said there were suspicions Nazarov was working for or being financed by Russian security services. At one point, given his residence in St. Petersburg, the former nerve center of the infamous mercenary outfit, the Wagner Group, theories arose that he could be working with it if for a time Wagner had enjoyed a close relationship with RIM and other neo-Nazi groups, as it was ambitiously looking to partner with foreign elements and increase its global reach. Clark noted that the news that Nazarov was purportedly acting under the direction of the Kremlin was not shocking to analysts in or outside government. Quote, if this is true, it will be interesting to see how Nazarov was recruited, he said. I wouldn't be surprised to learn that Russia is maintaining relationships with far-right groups throughout the globe, from Latin America to Eastern Europe and beyond. Absolutely fascinating there, and yet there's a lot of speculation, but there's also an awful lot of circumstantial evidence, and this guy has gone and moved to St. Petersburg and married himself to a Russian with Russian kids and blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, he appears very much in the Russian sphere of influence, and I can't believe that this person wouldn't have been in contact with Russian security services. It's basically impossible. So the link, I often get criticized for focusing on the far right and not the far left. And, you know, some people who sit on centre right don't like me attacking the far right because they think it kind of poisons their centre right, you know, establishment politics. And I understand that. But there is a much closer connection. And honestly, if you look into how Putin has used ultra-nationalist groups in Russia for some time, you can see that Russia has moved itself towards an ultra-nationalist far right. I mean, you look at Alexander Dugin, right, as the philosopher-in-chief of Russia, and you understand that, yeah, this is a country that is moving in a fascist direction while also claiming that anyone they're fighting against is a Nazi. And you've got this really weird situation where they've moved to the right. What they initially used to be on the kind of far left strategic planning of the kind of Soviet Union era, but since leaving the Soviet Union, they kind of, yeah, you get people that still fly the flags of the hammer and sickle and CCCP and blah, 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 but actually they've moved towards being the very fascists that they have decried for 80 years. And they also know how to mobilize these groups in Europe and elsewhere. Now, they also do that with the far left as well. But the thing is, the far left at the moment doesn't have as much purchase in particularly Europe. The far right does because of immigration issues, and they have been weaponized by the Kremlin as well. So if you whip up a storm about immigration, get everyone worried, and that's not to say that immigration isn't an issue, but if you weaponize that and you make it far more viral and virulent and, you know, seem much more of a problem than it might actually be, then you can foment discord in Europe, because at the end of the day, what you want to do is have an issue with social cohesion in Europe, break apart the EU, and then that's your main threat. The EU is a huge threat to Russia. So one of the easiest ways to undo the EU is to support far-right movements in Europe. And they are doing it, and they have been doing it. And that manifests itself in, say, Reform UK or UKIP as it was. And yeah, I'm not saying that Brexit wasn't an issue for many people in very genuine ways. But if you're going to be supporting one of those sides, Leave or Remain, Russia, who's it going to be? It's going to be Leave. And it's going to be the AfD in Germany. And it's going to be Rassemblement National in France. And it's going to be George Simeon in Romania, who is a Eurosceptic, and it's going to be Viktor Orban in Hungary, and it's going to be Robert Fico in Slovakia, and it's going to be the Confederacy in Poland, and it's going to be Vox in Spain. That is who you are going to support. All of those are Eurosceptics who are riding on a wave of anti-immigrant sentiment. You are just going to just absolutely throw gasoline on that fire, throw petrol on that fire. And that's what they are doing. And they're doing it so well. And here is a kind of a manifestation of that in the United States, whereby, you know, I'd imagine they'll probably be supporting both Antifa and the far right there. I just find it quite amazing that, considering what's going on in Israel at the moment, and actually I need to do a video on Israel, because Ben Gvir and Smotrich, that far right, Likud far right movement in the Netanyahu government, in that coalition, things are just looking horrific in Gaza at the moment. It's absolutely horrible. But why are we not seeing as many outright protests about that in the United States? I know someone said there are some still going on, but actually, I wonder whether at the time there was some kind of funding or fomenting by the Kremlin as well, and now that's resulted in Trump getting elected. They don't need to continue doing that, and so that dampens down, even though what's going on in Gaza at the moment is horrific, and it's just as bad, if not worse. Some of the news coming out there, some of the stuff is just absolutely horrendous, and this should be the time where you're hearing the most vociferous of protests, but you're not. Why not? So I think Russia will support and fund and motivate whatever group works in their best interest. It's not particularly ideologically connected, even though Russia's moved to an ultra-nationalist right. I think that's a Kremlin using those groups inside Russia domestically for their own ends, in the same way that they do that internationally. But it doesn't have to be the far right. It can be the far left. It's just that the far right at the moment is actually just more powerful across the world at the moment, has more purchase in most of the electorates that are meaningful to Russia. Okay, I'm going to leave you with a couple of. I just couldn't stop watching this earlier. I mean, a poor woman. She's sat there in like Soviet uniform, saying how wonderful the Kremlin is. There is the Kremlin falling. Honestly, I think I've seen this about 150 times today. It's one of these very watchable things. So that's Khabarovsk region of Russia. The Kremlin has fallen. The Victory Day celebration is going really well there. And then I'm going to leave you with this meme. I just absolutely love this. It's so weird. But Ukrainians, after 11 years of the Russia-Ukraine war. I love that. This is Ukrainians being the monkey here after 11 years of war. I'm not quite sure what I've just watched, but I love it. I presume that snake has been defanged. There you go. Just shrugging off. Oh, we're so used to it now. It's been going on for 11 years. Anyway, that's enough from me. You guys take care, and I'll speak to you soon. Toodle pips.